Hey, ladies and gentlemen, here we are on another Wednesday evening. I'm Tommy,
And I'm Joe.
and this is ToJo Live.
Welcome to ToJo Live.
Cheese! I'm a transparent guy, so I'm just going to tell you guys I'm having some nose issues tonight, and I tried to blow it real quick during that break. So that's why Tammy's laughing at me.
I said, you better hurry up. 3, 2, 1.
That's funny.
All right, guys, welcome to ToJo Live, where we are here to discuss your questions about life, faith, and the church. We would love to hear your questions. We would love to have you come on screen with us. You could do that by copying and pasting the link that Tammy will eventually put up in the chat box, and we can bring you on and we can have a discussion on those questions. And if you're more comfortable putting that question over in the chat box, as we see them, we will discuss those. We will read them and discuss them. Sometimes we have answers, sometimes we don't, but we'll always discuss them if you bring them up. So just glad to have you guys here and glad to be here with you on another episode. And this is the first time in a long time while I'm doing ToJo, I'm able to look out the window and see daylight.
Yeah.
So that's kind of nice. We in the winter months we play pickleball indoors, but after the time changes, we move back outdoors. And this past Sunday afternoon, we went out to play and we got everything organized and we got all the rotations set up and we went out, and as soon as they started playing, it started raining, and then it eventually turned to sleet. It started falling, so we had to stop. Just as soon as we started, we had to stop and go home. And one couple, it's about 25, 30-minute drive for them.
Wow.
They hated it.
But that's part of it. When you play outside, that's going to happen sometimes. So, guys, we want to open up with a scripture verse. This is kind of a unique one. Hey, Marianne and Vinny, glad to see you guys on here. This is from Philippians chapter 1, verse 3. And I'm kind of looking at maybe not going verse by verse like we did with Romans 12. But I am going to go over the next several weeks and just pick out some of my favorites from Philippians. But the first one is Philippians chapter 1, verse 3, and it says, I thank my God every time I remember you. Now, that's not a typical memory verse or verse that you just quote or whatever, but I think it has a lot of significance. I thank my God every time I remember you. Who are those people in your life that they are such a value to you? They're such a benefit to you. You feel such a strong connection to them that whenever you think of them, whenever you remember them, you just need to thank God. You know, the Philippian church was that kind of people to God or to Paul.
Yeah.
Paul was saying, you know, as he wrote to the Philippian church, every time I remember you, I thank God. And significant people in your life, that's what we ought to do. Whenever we think about them, we need to thank God. Maybe that's a motto we could use. Think and thank. Think of somebody that's important to you, and then thank God for them. Think and thank. That's a sermon right there, Joe.
I like that. Absolutely, it's a sermon.
That just came to my head. Think and thank. So,
think and thank.
Do what?
Think and thank. Right.
Think and thank.
Yeah.
Think and thank.
Thinky.
Say that 5 times fast. But just remember those people that mean a lot to you, who, you know, maybe they've brought benefit to you, or maybe you just got a strong connection to them. When you think about them, thank God for them. Just take a second, 2 seconds at the most, and just say, God, I thank you for that person. I think that's a very good example that Paul sets for us that we can follow. Think and Thank. Hey, our quote is it's a little bit longer quote, but I'm reading the book, Do What You Are. And the subtitle is Discover the Perfect Career for You Through the Secrets of Personality Type. Now, don't get concerned. I'm not looking for another career. But it's all about personality type. And I read just about everything I can on personality type. I love studying that stuff. I read the fourth edition of this book. It was out, I don't know, 8-10 years ago. This is the fifth edition of this book. And it's written by Paul Tiger, Barbara Barron, and Kelly Tiger. Now, Kelly Tiger is the daughter of Paul Tiger. And she actually helped with the fourth edition. The previous edition, she didn't. She was still a kid at that time, but she was old enough to actually help with the fourth edition. But on this edition, it includes a lot of it's made for the digital age, because a lot of careers are now that we didn't have 8 and 10 years ago when the previous edition was written. And so she's kind of taken the lead on this one. The other two authors are kind of taking a back seat, and Kelly Tiger has taken the lead. And it is written from a Christian perspective. All three authors are Christian. And so it's a pretty good book. But I love this quote. It says this: if you are in the right job, you should look forward to going to work, feel energized most of the time by what you do, feel your contribution is respected and appreciated, feel proud when describing your work to others, enjoy and respect the people you work with, and feel optimistic about the future. Now, I know some of you hear that and you're like, absolutely, those are important things, and I've got that in my job and I love it. Others are hearing that and they're going, well, that's a fairy tale.
Exactly.
You know, who looks forward to going to work? Who's energized by what they do most of the time? Who feels like your contribution is respected and appreciated? Oftentimes we talk about our jobs not being appreciated and us not being respected. How many of us feel proud when describing what we do, or feel respected, or find joy and respect of the people you work with? Or you feel optimistic about the future and pride about, oftentimes we look at jobs and we go, job is just a means to an end. It brings me a paycheck. It's got good benefits. And one day I'm looking forward to retirement. We've been going through this series, 1 Month to Live. And my encouragement to you, I realize this is strong. Please don't be mad at me for saying this. If you want to disagree with me, that's okay. I still love you. No feelings hurt or anything like that. But I do feel strongly about this opinion. If you can't say this about your job most of the time, you need to quit. Now, don't quit tomorrow.
That's right.
But begin making the plans now to shift out of that into something else. Life is too short to just work for a paycheck, benefits, and retirement. You don't even know if you're going to reach retirement.
Yeah.
Right?
Tommy,
retirement's a good thing. Don't misunderstand me.
Yeah. I was just going to chime in for a second. You make a really good point about don't do it tomorrow. One thing I've learned over the years, it's a whole lot easier to find a job when you have one.
Yeah.
When you're out of work, it's really tough. So as Tommy said, if you're not happy with your job, if you can't say those things about your job, start to look for another job. Might take a while.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, when you find it, it's worth it.
Yeah. Joe, and you've probably heard this in sales. I know you're a big sales guy, and I don't know that I'm a big sales guy, but I've had a lot of sales training. But I hear this a lot. People know when you're in desperation. If you have to make that sale because you're desperate, because you don't have any food to put on the table, people sense that and they're less likely to buy from you. It's the same situation when you're looking for a job. If you're in desperation, people sense that, and they put up a bit of a wall when they sense that desperation. So like Joe said, it's a lot easier to find a job if you already have one.
Yeah. Tommy, the desperation quote you just said is spot on too. And it's not only in business. I've seen it when I was looking for a house. Someone's like, I got to sell the house. Not exactly the way you want to position your.
Right.
That's why you use a broker. Or even when you're looking to get a car, sometimes the car salesman's like, hey, it's the end of the month. We get special on this. You got to do it. You got to take it by next Thursday. I'm like, what?
Or even if you're looking for a spouse, okay? They sense desperation. Don't be desperate.
Oh, that's funny.
There you go.
Hey, we want to say hi to Marianne and Vinny. We want to say hi to Christine.
Hey, Christine.
Well, shoot, it just went.
Sonia.
Sonia just came in.
Sonia's on here.
And hold on. Her name was Glenda Evans just joined us. It just popped off my screen.
Who is that? That name sounds familiar.
And then Ken and Bryn Parks is on here as well. And both of those look very familiar. If you guys are still on here, let us know.
Glad to have you guys on here.
Yeah, glad you're here. Let us know how we know you. If you're on here, you'll both look very familiar.
Sonia is. Go ahead, Joe.
No, you about to.
Oh, you're getting ready to say this. Yeah. Sonia's asking for prayer for the pain in her knee. She had a procedure done a couple weeks ago, and so we want to be in prayer for Sonia. So, Joe, do you mind lifting her up in prayer?
Be my pleasure, brother. Father God, we just want to lift up our sister Sonia. Dear God, she had that procedure on her knee and her knees, and we just know that right now, dear God, she's got a lot of discomfort. She's got a lot of pain. And we just pray that you would take that away, release that pain, help her feel better, because she loves you and we love her. And we pray this in Jesus' powerful and precious name. Amen.
Amen.
Sonia, we hope you feel better.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if you need anything, let us know. Let us know. We're here for you. All right. Hey, back to the job thing. Delatoro McNeil wrote a book several years ago called Stuck Between a Job and a Dream, or Caught Between a Job and a Dream. And one of the things that he talked about is there are three types of jobs. There's your dream job, your stepping stone jobs, and your dead end jobs. and your dead end jobs are those jobs that don't lead you anywhere. You're doing them for the paycheck, the benefits, and the retirement kind of thing. A stepping stone job is a job that you do in the process of working toward your dream job. And it doesn't have to be related. You know, for instance, when I was in college preparing for the ministry, I worked at a Cracker Barrel. I was a bus boy. I would bus tables. Didn't necessarily relate to ministry, at least not directly. Indirectly it did. But it helped me get to that point because it brought in an income while I was studying, and it had flexible hours where I could go to school full time and still be able to work and go through that. So it was a stepping stone job for me. And I've had several along the way. When I ran Upside Down Ministries, we were paid entirely through donations. And so there were times that Tammy and I both worked other jobs to kind of supplement our income. We knew we weren't going to be working in those jobs for 20, 30, 40 years, but they were stepping stone jobs to help us progress forward as we're working toward our dream jobs. And then obviously your dream job is the kind of job that all of those things we talked about in that quote are true. You look forward to it. You're energized by it. You feel respected. You like to tell people about it, and you feel optimistic about the future. Those are things that would be true about your dream job in that.
Good point. You know, one thing I just want to chime in, though, what's a kind of a phenomenon that's taken place over the last 5 years in the business world is that when you talk about those stepping stone jobs, to me, what's fascinating is it used to be if you were looking for a job or looking to hire someone, you would look for someone that spent several years at a particular company and had tenure and was committed and so forth. And if you were looking at someone's LinkedIn or a resume, you know, if they were only staying 6 months or 9 months or a year at a job, you would say, wow, something wasn't right there. But now it's changed in the digital age. is like it's actually looked as a positive if someone is going from one job to the next, because what's happening is it's stepping stone. They realized that they were better than that, and they went to another, for new. And it's just fascinating to me because I still look at the old way, like tenure and loyalty were.
Yeah, and it shows a healthy ambition too. There is an unhealthy ambition, but there's also a healthy ambition.
That's true.
Where we progress, we work forward, we if you're in a place where you're never going to see promotion, promote yourself by going to a better job.
Good.
So, but yeah, you're right, Joe. Used to, especially 50, 100 years ago, that was the thing. You found a job and you stuck with it until you retired. And but we're finding out that that's not necessarily always the best situation. Sometimes it is. Listen, sometimes you get into a place and you find it in your 20s and you stay there the rest of your life. And you know what? That is awesome. I know Rick Warren, when he was in college, he said, of course, obviously he knew he was going into the ministry, but he said he prayed to God, God, I don't care where you send me, as long as you keep me there for 40 years. And that was his desire. He wanted to be in a church or in a ministry for a long period of time. And I will say that typically that is the healthiest situations. The longer somebody's been there, typically, not always, but typically it's the healthier situation. And when Rick Warren started Saddleback in 1980, he did not retire until this past year in 2023 is when he retired. And he would have retired earlier. I think he was planning on retiring in 2020, but then COVID hit and he didn't want to do that to his church, retire in the midst of all of that. So he waited till that kind of settled down and he retired in 2023. So
yeah, it's an amazing story what he did in those 40 years or 42 years too.
Oh, I know.
How that church was at one point. I mean, how small was it? It was just a small, he started.
Well, it started out as just a Bible study in his living room with like 2 other couples or something like that.
And now they have how many campuses? And
I think they've got like 7 or 8 maybe more, maybe more than that. And they've planted churches, started churches in other countries. And it's amazing what they've done. Yeah. Thousands of people that they reach every Sunday morning.
Yep.
So. All right. Are we ready for our trivia?
Yeah.
Trivia.
Yeah.
Do we have scores?
We have scores. You want to hear them?
Yes.
All right. I did add last week's in there. So starting at 1, Joe, you got to get Laura on here because she's had 1 forever.
Yeah, Laura's babysitting.
Oh, okay. All right.
Well, she's got a good excuse.
She's got 1. We got Joan Crenshaw with 2, Christine with 2, Karen has 2, William and Marianne are tied at 3, Mark Hendricks, you've got 4, and that's it. That's our closest ones. So it's anybody's game at this point.
It is anybody's game. All right, here is the trivia question for the evening. Now, I haven't seen Francesca and Karen on here.
I haven't, but they have a way of coming
sometimes
in.
They kind of sneak in, like Chris Klingon used to do that. You wouldn't even know he was on until we asked the question, and then boom, he'd answer it. All right, here's the question. How old was Noah when the flood happened? How old was Noah when the flood happened?
There they go. Wow.
We ought to go on the road, Joe.
No, you shouldn't.
The whistling duet.
No, you shouldn't. I love you guys. guys, and there are a lot of things that the both of you do amazingly well. Going on the road with the whistling show would not be one of them.
I would agree with that, Tammy.
Marianne said 520.
Oh,
That
yes.
is incorrect. That's around the time that he started building the ark, but that is not when the flood came. So you're close, relatively close
And look,
by those standards.
I'm 49 and I'm tired. I'd be too tired to build an ark. He was 520. What am I
520.
complaining about? Man, can you imagine?
And he didn't have any donuts and ice cream to celebrate. All right, there we go. Marianne and Vinny got it at 600. We find that answer in Genesis chapter 7, verse 6. That Noah was 600 years old when the flood came. But he worked on that ark for a long, long time. He was in his early 500s when he started working on that ark. You know, sometimes when we tell that story, we don't necessarily take into consideration the timeline. We think, oh, he spent a few months working on that ark. No, he spent several years. He spent what we would consider a lifetime working on that ark.
So then how old was he when it stopped raining?
Well, it rained for 40 days and 40 nights.
So I'm thinking it was 600 years and 40 days.
There you go. But he was actually afloat. The world was actually flooded for, was it one?
Over 1,000 days. Wasn't
No, it wasn't over 1,000 days. It was 175, I think. Yeah, no.
1,000. No. Because 1,000 days is 3 years.
Yeah, it wasn't.
It was 3 months.
Marianne just noted that all I could remember was he lived 350 years after the flood.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he lived to 950.
And still was not the oldest person ever live. I'm just looking this up.
Had to be in the top 10 though.
Do what?
He had to be in the top 10 or the final 4.
There you go.
Getting ready
That's what
for
we
that.
need to do. We need to bracket out all the ages from the Old
my
Testament.
God. Y'all don't understand. This man's crazy when it comes to bracketing.
The waters flooded the earth. This is in Genesis chapter 7, verse 24. The waters flooded the earth for 150 days. So 150 days is how long the flood was on the earth.
Wow.
So what is that? That's 120 would be 4 months. About 5 months, almost half a year. So,
wow.
All right. So where does that put Marianne and Vinny? Are they 4?
They got 4 now.
All right. So they're tied for first at the moment. Hey guys, just as a reminder, this is a show where we discuss your questions about life, faith, in the church. So if you have any questions, please feel free to bring those up. You can copy and paste the link and come on the screen with us, or you could just put it up in the chat box and we will address those as they come up. If you guys don't have any questions, we have to come up with our own questions. And so here's a question that sometimes I am asked. What exactly is a disciple? Because we see that term used a lot in the scriptures. Talk about the disciples and even talks about the 12 disciples in there. And what's the difference between a disciple and an apostle? Are they interchangeable? And so let's just talk a little bit about that. First of all, a disciple comes from a Greek word that means learner or pupil. It's where we get and the actual word is math. Let me see if I can say this. Mathetes. I'm not a Greek scholar, so maybe I'm pronouncing it wrong. But it's where we get our word math. So that's kind of interesting. A disciple is one who follows and learns from someone else. It is not, however, only about engaging and learning, but it also includes the attitude of humility and being teachable and able to receive correction from our teacher. Now, I will tell you, oftentimes in Jewish tradition, one of the things that would happen is if you had a young child, especially a boy, unfortunately, I don't know if this happened a whole lot with girls, but especially a boy, if you wanted them to learn from a specific rabbi, then they would actually go and live with that rabbi, and they would become a disciple of that rabbi. So he would teach him, he would learn from his example. They would do classes together, but they would also do ministry together. They would go out and do things. He would learn not only like sit down and let me teach you, but also learning by the example of just living with the rabbi. And the title that they used for the student was a disciple. You would be a disciple of that rabbi. And so as a disciple, we are followers, we are learners, we are pupils, we are mentees. They become our mentor in that, our coach, if you will, although everything that is discipleship is not necessarily coaching, but coaching can be one way of doing discipleship with somebody. And so anyone who is a follower of Jesus and is learning from him, who is walking with him, following him, he is a disciple. That's what a disciple would do with their rabbi. They would follow them wherever they went and learn from them in that. Now, how's this different from an apostle? Because sometimes we see those words used a little bit interchangeably in the New Testament, especially when it's talking about the 12 apostles. Sometimes it'll refer to them as the 12 disciples. Here's the thing. Every apostle is a disciple, but not every disciple is an apostle. Now, there is a specific meaning of the word apostle, and there's a general, I guess, generic, if you want to use that term, generic meaning of apostle. The word apostle in the specific sense is one who is sent out by Jesus. An apostle of Jesus would be one who is sent out specifically by Jesus. And specifically, we're talking about the 12 apostles. There were a few others that were called apostles along the way. Obviously, Matthias replaced Judas as an apostle. Paul was chosen by Jesus and then sent out to the Gentiles as an apostle. He was sent out in that sense. In the book of Hebrews, Jesus is referred to as an apostle. He was sent out by the Father, by God. He was sent out from heaven into the world. He was an apostle. In that specific sense, they were sent out specifically by God or by Jesus to a specific task. In a generic sense, in a general sense, it simply means to be sent out. So some people today will use this term apostle for like a missionary. When a missionary is ordained by an organization or a congregation to go into the mission field. Maybe they're doing inner city missions. Maybe they're going to a specific country. Sometimes people will also use this term for church planters, people who are starting new churches. They've been sent out to go and start these new churches. And in a general sense, that would be true. Just always realize that there's a difference between the specific sense of an apostle, which we only read about in the New Testament, and the general sense of apostle, which is sometimes used even today for those that are sent out. They have similarities, but there's also distinctions between those two apostles. So there you have the difference between a disciple and apostle. We're all disciples. If you're a follower of Jesus, you're a disciple. Doesn't necessarily mean you're an apostle. And it definitely doesn't mean you're an apostle in the specific sense that we read about in the New Testament. Now, you may be, in the general sense, an apostle, doing church planning and stuff like that. If you use that, I have done church planning. I've worked with 2 different new church works. I will tell you straight up front, I would never use the term apostle for myself. It just feels uncomfortable to me. So I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying I'm not comfortable with that title.
Yeah, I agree with you, brother. I do agree.
Yeah.
Because of the biblical meaning and the fact that Jesus, appointed and sent them out, to me, it would be more. Let me just say, it's not humbling.
Right.
to refer. Yeah.
Yeah. And this is a little something I found on the internet for apostle. The word apostle means one who is sent out. In the New Testament, there are 2 primary usages of the word apostle. The first is this specifically referring to the 12 apostles of Jesus Christ. The second is in generically referring to other individuals who are sent out to be messengers or ambassadors of Jesus Christ. So it points out that specific and that general generic usage of the term. And let me just say along those lines, I don't call myself reverend either. I'm in my opinion, the only one to be revered in that sense is God, the Lord. When I say the Lord, I include God the Father, Jesus the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Anybody other than that, I've never asked anybody to call me reverend. I don't like to put it like, I've been in some churches where they have like pastor's office or something like that, and I've always told them, said, please don't put reverend on that. Sometimes when I do funerals, they'll put reverend, like if they're putting the announcement in the paper on the internet or something like that. But if they ask me, sometimes they'll ask me and I'll say, just put minister or pastor or something like that. Because I am, just like I'm not comfortable with the word apostle, I'm not comfortable with the title reverend either. And don't call me father unless you're one of my kids.
I've actually corrected people when they've said that. They've said reverend. And I said, don't call me reverend and don't call me irreverent. I'm somewhere in between.
Somewhere in between. I like that. Yeah, and I've never had but one person ever take issue with that. I had a guy one time argue with me about that. Of course, he was from a tradition that always refers to their minister as reverend. And again, I'm not saying that's a sin or anything like that. I am not comfortable with that title at all because, like Joe, I believe that only the Lord is to be revered. But one guy kind of took me to task on that. And he says, well, you're doing the Lord's work. You're proclaiming the word of God. You should be revered. And I'm like, I don't necessarily see that in the New Testament. Respected, yeah, but respected as a person, not because I've got a different gift than somebody. Listen, I've got a gift. Joe's got a gift. We're able to get up front and proclaim the word of God in a way that communicates it to people's hearts and minds. And we use that gift. But our gift is not any more important than anybody else's gift. And so we should all be respected, but none of us should be revered. Now we get the spotlight when you turn on our Sunday morning services. Joe and I, we're in front of the camera more than anybody else. But that doesn't mean we're more important than anybody else. It doesn't even mean our gift is any more important than anybody else's gift. It just so happens that it gets the most limelight at the time. I love the illustration that Rick Warren uses. He says in their living room, in their house, they've got this beautiful chandelier. And when people come over, man, they talk about how pretty it is and they brag about it and all of this. But he said, and it's expensive. But he said he's also got a light in the hallway between his bedroom and his bathroom. It's like a $5 light from Walmart. And he says, when I get up in the middle of the night and I have to go to the bathroom, which one of those lights are most valuable? It's that $5 light plugged into the hallway. It's not that big chandelier. So listen, all of our gifts are needed and are just as valuable as any other gift.
So, hey, before we get to Marianne's question there, I've got to just share a quick story because you mentioned you didn't like being called father, or no one ever called you father. Well, it happened to me once. I was in Manhattan. I was driving back to Long Island, and there was actually a funeral from someone in our church that had passed away. And it started at 7 o'clock, and I had hit all kinds of traffic, and I had agreed to say a prayer at this. So I was going a little faster a lot faster than I should have on Northern Boulevard. And I got pulled over by a cop, and he asked me why I was speeding, and in the passenger seat I had a Bible with some notes on it, and I explained to him that I was a minister and I was going to a church for a funeral. So he said to me, "Okay, Father, I'm going to let you go without a ticket." He goes, "But just drive slowly." So I said, "Thank you, my son." It's a true story.
Oh, wow. That's funny.
I also need to point out, my husband says he has issues with these, with titles like this sometimes, but I will tell you that when he got his master's degree, he didn't hesitate to make sure that everybody in the family knew that it was okay to now call him Master Tommy. Yeah, just pointing that out. Just saying.
That was just for my family.
Yeah.
When I get my doctorate, you have to call me Dr. Tommy.
Oh, gosh.
All right, here is Marianne and Vinny's question. Just wondering if there was a specific reason that Jesus chose 12. And I think the answer to that is yes. Although Jesus doesn't say anywhere in the New Testament, this is why I chose 12. But there are some things that we can look at that are very specific, I believe. The one that just jumps out is that it's almost parallel to the 12 tribes of Israel. So you know that the New Testament is not a replacement of the Old Testament. It's a fulfillment of the Old Testament. So the 12 apostles were not there to replace the 12 tribes of Israel, but it was a fulfillment of all of that. And we see that number 12, 10, 3, 7, 40. Those are some of the numbers that we see repeated a lot throughout the Bible. And so there's significance there. So from a theological perspective, I think it was a carryover, and I'm not alone in this. A lot of theologians feel the same way, that it was a carryover and fulfillment of the 12 tribes of Israel now coming into being through the 12 apostles of the church, 12 apostles of Jesus, who were, considered the pillars, the leaders of the early church in that. Another reason, and I think this is just a practical reason, is it's a good number for a small group of people. If you get a lot less than that, then you're kind of short-handed. If you get much more than that, it's hard to keep direction and focus unless you kind of divide them up somehow. That's why in big businesses, you have different departments. The CEO can't be intimately involved in every person's life. If he's got 1,000 employees, he just can't do that. So you have smaller departments. And it's interesting, even in New York City, the largest city in the United States. But if you go into the city, you'll see that they kind of divide themselves into little areas. You've got Little Italy. You've got areas that are mostly Jewish. You've got areas that are mostly Chinese. You've got, back in the 60s, you had areas like Greenwich Village that was mostly like a bohemian type group of people. People tend to naturally make themselves smaller when they're in large groups. And the larger the city, the more likely you are to have those things, because it's a practical organization and identification type of thing. And people will tell you now that teach on small groups in churches, they will tell you somewhere between 10 and 15 is the perfect number. If you get much smaller than that, you tend to lose steam. If you get much more than that, people tend to get overlooked within that small group. So somewhere between 10 and 15 is the prime number for a small group to be very healthy. And so I think there is a theological reason. As I said, it's in parallel to the 12 tribes of Israel, the 12 apostles, but also from a practical standpoint, it was a great number for Jesus to be able to take approximately 3 years and equip and empower them to carry on his ministry after he left this earth. So great question, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you got anything to add to that, Joe?
No, I was just going to say it's a good thing he did as far as equipping those 12.
Yeah.
We wouldn't be here today if it weren't.
It's funny when we talk about that. There's a great author out there called Laurie Beth Jones, and she wrote a book called Jesus CEO. She does a lot of business stuff, but she looks at it from a biblical perspective. And so she's written a book called Jesus CEO. She's written a book called Jesus Entrepreneur, looking at entrepreneurship from a biblical standpoint. She's written a book called Jesus Life Coach, looking at Jesus as our life coach. But in Jesus CEO, she talks about the fact, she was doing a conference with a bunch of leaders, and she goes, how many of you would like to have employees that would sacrifice to the point of giving their life for you and your mission? And of course, everybody's hand goes up. And then she goes, well, there's a catch. You got to go first. And of course, she's using it as an example, Jesus and the apostles. The apostles were so devoted to Jesus, they were willing to sacrifice their own life for him and his mission. But the catch is, Jesus was willing to do the same thing for them. He was willing to give his life for them. And then she goes on to say, even in this perfect situation, Jesus even had one staffing problem. So referring to Judas. But
That's funny, staffing problem.
Yeah, it said even in that he had one staffing issue. So, but look at Marianne and Vinny's giving me the laughter tears there. So it's just a practical thing. If you get too many, it's hard to organize, and if you get too few, it's hard to get everything done. It's hard to get the momentum going in that. So 12 is a good number, in addition to the fact that I think there's theological ramifications of that. So, great question. I love it. I love it when you guys have questions. All right. Here's another question I'm sometimes asked. What is the importance of the Sabbath? We talk a lot about Sunday being the Sabbath, which technically it wasn't. In the Old Testament, Saturday was the Sabbath. And really, according to Jewish tradition, the Sabbath actually started on Friday evening and went into Saturday evening. It would actually end on Saturday evening. And I think many of them still practice that today. That is their Sabbath. And it simply means seventh, or the seventh day in that. But people oftentimes, as Christians, look at Sunday as the Sabbath. Now, the reason Sunday is our day of worship really has nothing whatsoever to do with the Sabbath. It has to do with the day that Jesus was resurrected. Jesus was resurrected not on the last day of the week, which would be Saturday, but on the first day of the week, which would be Sunday. And I know that can be confusing for us, because in our culture, really Sunday has become the last day of the week for businesses and schools and stuff like that. We kind of organize that way, that Sunday's the last day of the week. And even in my calendar, I don't like calendars that have Sunday as the first day of the week, even though I believe that's more biblical. From a practical standpoint, it confuses me. Now, Tammy actually prefers Sunday on the first day of the week in her calendars. And so obviously we don't have the same calendar. But Sunday was not the Christian replacement of the Sabbath. Sunday was a day of worship for us because we celebrate the resurrection of Jesus. Now, when it comes to keeping the Sabbath, I will say, and some people disagree with me on this, and that's okay. I will say that the principle is more important than the day. Meaning this, our bodies we were made to have a day of rest every 7 days. And business studies have actually shown that people who work 6 days and rest a day are actually more productive than those who work 7 days. Now, that doesn't make sense mathematically, but in reality, that's what happens. It's been studied by secular people, not by the church, not by theologians, by people in the business world. They've studied this, and they have discovered that people who work 6 days and get a day off are more productive than those who work 7 days. It's almost like we were created that way, maybe. Because I think we were. I think God made us to have a day of rest. Now, if you are in a situation, first of all, I would encourage you to try to be very intentional about taking a 24-hour day off. If you can't do that in the sense of, well, I'm Saturday is going to be my off day. That's going to be my relaxed day. Maybe you have to do it where it's 12 hours of one day and it leads into 12 hours of the next day. I don't think that's the best way to do it, but I think it's better than nothing to have that 24-hour period, even if it stretches over 2 technical days, to have that time set aside and use some of that time for worship. It doesn't have to be corporate worship. Use that time for gather. And listen, if you want to do that on Sunday, praise God, do it on Sunday. Start it off with worship in the morning and then use the rest of the day to relax, maybe hang with your family, maybe have a little bit of personal time, whatever re-energizes and refreshes you. But our bodies, not only do we need that spiritually, we need it physically, we need it mentally and emotionally. We are healthier in all 4 of those areas if we have a Sabbath every 7 days. If we have that time that we relax, we have a different pace, we're able to take it easy and just kind of refuel, if you will. Joe, you have any comments on that?
No, I mean, and spend time with your loved ones.
Yes.
Because if you're working a crazy schedule and they're working a crazy schedule, for everyone to be able to at least not be at work, but be together is super important. And I love what you said. It's not just the rest and so forth, but it's the health, spiritually, emotionally, physically, mentally. Look, if God took a day off when he created the world, pretty good example.
Yeah. If God, who never rests or slumbers, needed that rest, then obviously we need that rest as well. And it's just, listen, our whole life, all of creation has a rhythm to it. If you think about it, it's got a rhythm. We have spring, and then we have summer, and then we have fall, and then we have winter. There's a rhythm to that, and then it repeats. There's a rhythm to it. There's a rhythm to creation. In the spring, the leaves come out and the flowers bloom and the grass grows, and and it continues on into the summer, but it does change a little bit in the summer. And then in the fall, it begins to slow down. And by wintertime, it completely stops, and a lot of it dies out, for a period of time. And then the springtime comes, and the life comes back into things. There's this rhythm to us. There are sleeping rhythms. People who study this stuff say that most people, now everybody's different, but most people, they sleep in 90-minute rhythms. And so, when we hit that snooze button, when we wake up and we hit that snooze button that typically, goes off 9 minutes later, and you feel more tired than you did when the alarm first went off, that's because you're interrupting a sleep rhythm. And if you could calculate, I'm not saying I always do this, sometimes I do, but if you could calculate to wake up at the end of one of those 90-minute rhythms, then you will typically feel more refreshed than if you wake up interrupting one of those rhythms. So, for instance, say a end of a 90-minute rhythm for you is 6 o'clock. You would feel more refreshed waking up at 6 o'clock than you would at 6:30, because by then you are already into another rhythm, and you're interrupting that rhythm to bring you out of that. There's a rhythm to everything. Stop and look at history. Strong people create good times. And by that, I mean economic security and stuff like that. Strong people develop good times. Good times creates weak people. Weak people create hard times. Hard times create good people. And if you will look at history, you will see that cycle. You could see it in the nation of Israel. They'd be strong, and the economy would be strong. God would bless them, and everything would be good. But then the children and grandchildren that came out of this time, they would turn away from God. They would become very immoral and turn their backs on God, and they would create, that the bad people, the weak people, would create hard times, bad times. But those hard times, people would rise to the occasion. They would develop character. They would return back to God. And so it created good people. You see it in our history.
Well, a lot of people would feel you see it today, too, what's happening.
Yeah. You see, you talk about the generation, the World War II generation is oftentimes called the greatest generation. Well, that's because they came out of a tough time with the Great Depression.
Right.
So hard times created strong people. And then strong people created good times. And if you look at the 50s and even the early 60s, we had, especially in the 50s, we had strong economic growth and family stability and all of that type of stuff. But then we went through a time of turmoil in the 60s because those good times created weak people. Now, please, don't misunderstand me. I'm not getting political here. I'm just looking at the rhythm of history. And then from that, it created strong people. We see that. And listen, we have gone through some of that with COVID. We went through hard times. We're going through hard times now. These times are going to create strong people. I don't know exactly how long that will take, but eventually it's going to create strong people, which are going to create good times, positive. So it's just everything is a rhythm. That's probably more than you wanted to hear about that. But I just find that stuff fascinating.
Brother Marianne posted something when we were talking about everyone taking a Sabbath. She said everyone did that before they repealed the Sunday blue laws in New York. And tell me what that was is years ago, growing up as a child, All the stores in New York closed on Sunday.
We had that in Kentucky and Virginia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We had blue laws.
Yeah, there was a time in Kentucky that the only thing you really had open, and this was really before me, or maybe when I was really, really young, certain sections of Kentucky. When you got up into northern Kentucky, it was a little different. But the only thing that would really be open would be hospitals and one pharmacy. And they would actually cooperate with one another, the different pharmacies in the area. And like one Sunday of the month, one would be open. And then the next Sunday, the other one would be open so that this one could close. And so they did that so that people would have access to their medicines and stuff, but not all of them would be open every Sunday. And of course, nothing like that today, you know.
No.
And I will tell you, for the most part, I don't go into places of business on Sunday. Now, sometimes I do. If somebody invites me out to dinner and wants to pay for my dinner or something like that, I'll do that. Or if there's something like special going on. But we never, as a family, we never go, let's just go out to eat this Sunday. We don't do that. It's a commitment that Tammy and I made before we were married. And we made it because we heard a preacher say one time, it was my preacher at Locust Grove Christian Church, Dave Maltson. And it's funny, I didn't even hear him say it directly because I had a weekend ministry at the time in the same area, and I would come together with my parents and we would talk about, what happened at church. And they said that he said that it's not necessarily sinful to work on a Sunday, but it might be sinful for us that makes people work on Sunday by going into those places of business. And I never really thought about that before. And the more I thought about it, I began to pray about it. And the more I pray about it, I go, you know what? I'm going to stop.
Yeah.
I'm going to stop doing that. And probably 90% or more of my time, I don't go into places of business. Now, I say that every Sunday I do go play pickleball at a pickleball place.
That's different, though.
And it is different in a sense that we see that as a ministry. It's a way to be able to.
It's actually an outreach of our small group.
It is an outreach. It was an outreach of a small group we used to have that we don't even have here anymore. It started out with us, and we weren't even going to the place to rent it. We were going outside where we played for free, and nobody had to work for that. And so that was different. I just happened to look at the clock, and I noticed we're running out of time. So, Joe, you have any closing remarks for us, my friend?
No. Just one last comment that Marianne made that I think is pretty important. She said, when we were growing up, every Sunday was like a family holiday. And I'll say that growing up with my family, that was true. Every Sunday, the big dinner was at 1:00 after church. We'd all sit down. No one missed it. Grandparents were there. It was a holiday. It was a time that families stayed together.
Yeah. We did that as well. Matter of fact, I remember we would almost always have the same meal. Now, sometimes we had extended family and everybody, and it was different. But most of the time we had the same meal because my dad had heart issues, and he asked his doctor if he could still eat fried eggs because he loved fried eggs. And his heart doctor told him 2 a week. That's it. You're allowed 2 a week. And so Sunday was fried egg day. My dad would eat his 2 fried eggs on Sunday afternoon after church, and we would have other stuff with it as well. But I knew we always had fried eggs on Sunday afternoon.
There you go.
So
awesome.
Hey guys, we are wrapping up our message series on 1 month to live. And let me just say, sometimes we have series that has more kind of chitter chatter about it than others. And this is one of those. People have really gotten into this. I'm hearing feedback throughout the week with that. People are talking about it as they're going out the door on Sundays. And listen, that does our hearts good to know that, we're having an impact in that. So thank you for that feedback. But we're wrapping it up this week with 30 days to a no regrets life. But listen, just because we're wrapping up the series doesn't mean the impact of the series is wrapping up. I pray and hope that this continues to impact your life, whether you live another 30 days or another 30 years or another 50 years, whatever it may be. So All right. Hey, guys, thank you for being on here. You might have a little bit of sunlight out there still left if you want it.
No.
I'm getting ready to go watch some Southeastern Conference basketball. So this is March, and that's what I do. Love you guys. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining us.